Naomi Clark stepped off the bus and onto the clean, smooth sidewalk of Ivory Hills like she did every Tuesday and Friday. The air always smelled different here, like new paint, cut grass, and money. Big white houses lined the street in perfect rows, their lawns trimmed so neatly it looked like nobody actually lived there. No toys in the yard, no loud music. Just silence and spotless glass dot. She adjusted the strap of her worn cleaning bag on her shoulder and smoothed the front of her faded blue blouse. Her fingers brushed the small gold necklace at her throat, her mother's, the only piece of home she wore every day. "Just work, Naomi," she whispered to herself in her soft Jamaican accent. "Do you work? Go home. That's it." She walked up the long stone path to the Hawthorne house. The place looked like a hotel. Tall pillars, shiny door, big windows sparkling in the sun. Naomi pressed the doorbell and waited, feeling that familiar tightness in her chest. She had other clients, but this house always made her feel the smallest. Victoria Hawthorne opened the door with her usual tight smile that never reached her eyes. "You're late," she said, even though Naomi was 10 minutes early. She always was. Naomi bowed her head a little. "Good morning, Mrs. Hawthorne. Bus was a little slow, but I'm here now." Victoria raised an eyebrow. "Whatever. Just don't scratch the marble this time. Come in." Naomi stepped inside and, like always, felt the shift. Outside, she was herself. Inside this house, she became the maid. She changed into soft house shoes near the entrance and moved quietly toward the supply closet, where she kept her gloves and cloth. From the kitchen, she heard Chloe's voice. "Mom, did you hear that?" "Bus was a little slow," Chloe said, dragging out the word in a mocking tone. "What even is that?" Naomi paused mid-step, back turned to them, eyes closing for a split second. Victoria laughed. "It's not proper English, that's for sure. Sometimes I can't understand a word she says." They weren't whispering. They didn't lower their voices. They never did. Naomi swallowed hard and forced herself to keep walking. She opened the closet, took out the duster, and tried to focus on the routine. Dust first, floors next, bathrooms last. Work meant money. Money meant rent, food, the light bill. Something better for her family. She started in the living room, dusting the huge shelves filled with expensive decorations nobody touched. Silver frames, tall vases, books that looked brand new. As she reached up to wipe a high shelf, she heard them again through the open doorway. Chloe cleared her throat loudly and said in an exaggerated accent, "Good morning, Mrs. Hawthorne. I'm here to clean your house." Victoria burst out laughing. "Chloe, stop it," she said, but there was no real warning in her voice. "If she hears you, she might quit. Then I'll have to go find another one." Chloe giggled. "There are plenty of maids, Mom. It's not like they're hard to replace." Naomi's hand shook around the duster. She stared at a family photo on the shelf. Victoria, her husband, and Chloe smiling on some beach. They looked so happy, so relaxed. She wondered what it felt like to live in a world where you were always the one being served. She turned away from the photo and kept working. Her eyes stung, but she blinked quickly. Tears never helped. Tears didn't pay bills. Her phone buzzed quietly in the pocket of her skirt. Naomi glanced around, making sure Victoria wasn't near, and pulled it out just enough to see the screen. It was a message from Aaron. "Love you. Big day coming soon. Proud of you." A small smile tugged at her lips. She could almost hear his voice, warm and patient. "Y'all always know when to text me." Aaron, she whispered under her breath. Her husband was the opposite of Ivory Hill's soft edges, warm eyes, a gentle laugh that made her feel safe. People were always surprised when they learned what he did. He didn't brag. He didn't show off. But he was one of the most respected linguists in his field. He studied languages, researched accents, traveled to conferences. He always told Naomi her voice was his favorite sound in the world. "Your English is beautiful," he would tell her at night as they washed dishes together. "It carries history, rhythm, strength." Naomi believed him when it was just them in their small apartment. But inside the Hawthorne house, his words felt far away. As she moved to dust the coffee table, Chloe walked into the living room, scrolling on her phone. She stopped, leaning against the doorway, watching Naomi work like she was watching a show. "You missed a spot," Chloe said flatly, pointing at an imaginary speck. "And maybe try saying good morning the right way next time." Naomi's cheeks burned. She straightened and forced a polite smile. "Good morning, Miss Chloe," she said softly. "We'll do better next time." Chloe smirked and walked away, mumbling loudly enough for Naomi to hear. People like her shouldn't talk in public. It's embarrassing. Naomi's smile faded the moment Chloe's back turned. Her shoulders sagged. She looked down at her hands, rough from cleaning, cracked from chemicals. Trembling just a little, she thought of the first time Aaron had held those same hands and said, "These are hands that build, not hands that serve." But in Ivory Hills, nobody cared about what her hands had built. They only cared that she moved quietly, spoke softly, and never forgot her place. From the kitchen, Victoria called out, "Naomi, when you're done in there, I need you to polish the silverware. And please, don't talk while the guests are here later. Your accent is distracting." Naomi closed her eyes for a brief moment, took a breath, and answered, "Yes, Mrs. Hawthorne." She didn't ask who the guests were. She didn't know about the charity gala. She didn't know about the keynote speech. She had no idea that the same woman who mocked her English would soon stand in front of a crowd bragging about hosting a world-famous linguist. And she definitely didn't know that the man they were all waiting to hear from the expert, the scholar, the respected voice in the room, would be the same man who texted her in the middle of the day just to say he loved the way she spoke. As Naomi finished dusting and walked toward the front door at the end of her shift, she passed by Chloe again. The girl was leaning on the staircase railing, phone in her hand, nails painted a pale pink. Chloe didn't bother to move aside. Naomi stepped around her carefully and whispered, "Have a nice day, Miss Chloe." Chloe rolled her eyes and said under her breath, "But loud enough. People like her shouldn't talk in public." Naomi's hand tightened on the handle of her cleaning bag. For a second, she wanted to turn around and say something, anything. But the words died in her throat. She lowered her eyes, opened the door, and stepped back into the bright, polished world of Ivory Hills, feeling smaller than when she arrived. What she didn't see was that a storm was already forming just beyond the surface of her quiet life, because someone else, her husband, was getting ready to step into the very same house, and he wasn't coming as help. He was coming as the voice they would not be able to silence. Naomi arrived early the next morning, just hoping that today would be different. She held on to that tiny hope the way some people hold on to prayer. But the moment she stepped inside the Hawthorne home, she felt the tension in the air, the kind that tells you something bad is waiting with your name on it. Victoria stood in the dining room with her arms crossed, tapping one heel against the hardwood. She looked Naomi up and down like she was checking for defects. "There you are," Victoria said sharply. "I texted you 10 minutes ago." Naomi clutched her phone. She hadn't heard it buzz. "Sorry, Mrs. Hawthorne. My phone in my bag." "Didn't hear." Victoria cut her off with a forced laugh. "I really need you to start speaking clearly, Naomi. I can't understand half the things you say." The words hit Naomi like a slap. She stood still, hands tightening around her cleaning cloth. "Yes, ma'am," she whispered, even though she understood perfectly fine that Victoria's issue wasn't her clarity. It was her nationality. As Naomi moved to begin dusting the dining table, Chloe walked in holding her phone, giggling. "Mom, look at this." She snorted. "I posted that video of Naomi saying, 'Good morning, Mrs. Hawthorne,' and it already has comments." Victoria leaned over, delighted. "Oh, that's hilarious. Send it to me." Naomi froze mid-step, her heart thudding. "Miss Chloe, ya record me?" Chloe shrugged casually. "It was funny. Seriously, lighten up." The dining room chandelier sparkled overhead, perfectly polished, perfectly bright, too bright. Naomi suddenly felt exposed, like every flaw she ever had was under a spotlight. "I didn't give permission," Naomi said softly, trying to stay calm. Chloe scoffed. "Relax. It's not like you're a celebrity. No one even cares." Victoria chimed in without looking up from her phone. "Chloe's just being silly. And you really shouldn't be sensitive about these little things." Naomi swallowed the lump in her throat. Sensitive. That was their word when they wanted her quiet. Later, while she polished the silverware, Victoria hovered behind her like a shadow. "You're doing it wrong," she snapped. "Didn't I explain this last week?" Naomi blinked in confusion. She was doing it exactly the way she always had. "I thought—" "There you go again," Victoria interrupted. "That accent makes it so hard to know what you mean." Naomi lowered her gaze. "I'm sorry, ma'am." Victoria sighed heavily. "I don't know how they teach English where you're from, but here, speaking properly matters." Naomi felt her cheeks burn. "They teach English fine where I'm from," she said quietly. Chloe entered again, laughing. "Mom, maybe she should take lessons? I mean, she sounds like she's singing when she talks." Victoria smirked. "Oh, people like her don't take lessons, honey. They don't need them for. They're kind of jobs." Naomi's breath caught. People like her. They're kind of jobs. Their kind of place in the world. Naomi finished her task silently, holding her emotions back like a dam just barely holding water. But cracks were forming. When she stepped outside to take the trash out, she exhaled shakily. The air outside felt different, cooler, kinder. She leaned against the trash bin, her eyes stinging. "I'm trying," she whispered to herself. "I'm trying my best." She thought about her daughter, Layla, asking last week, "Mommy, why you sound different than the other moms?" Naomi didn't have the heart to explain. She just smiled and said, "Different don't mean wrong, baby." Her phone buzzed. A message from Erin. "I'm finishing my keynote speech today. You inspire everything I write." Naomi smiled weakly, that tiny spark of warmth returning. Inside, however, the storm worsened. Victoria called out from the doorway, "Naomi, when you're done, come here. I need to talk to you about your pay." Naomi wiped her eyes quickly and walked back in. Victoria stood with her arms crossed. "I've decided to deduct 20% from this week's payment. Your English makes instructions harder. Miscommunication slows everything down." Naomi's heart dropped. I need that money, ma'am." "I do everything you ask." Victoria shrugged. "Well, maybe if you worked on speaking correctly, this wouldn't happen." "Consider it motivation." Naomi felt something break inside her. Not loudly, not dramatically, just a small crack. The kind that comes from being chipped away at, over and over and over. She walked back to her cleaning supplies slowly, like her legs were carrying the weight of the whole house on her shoulders. As she knelt to wipe the baseboards, her tears fell silently onto the floor. She wiped them away quickly, praying nobody noticed. In that moment, Naomi felt the familiar loneliness she had carried since childhood, the loneliness of being unheard, unseen, and unvalued. But something else also stirred within her, something she didn't recognize yet. SEEDA spark, a quiet, buried strength waiting for the right moment to rise. She didn't know it yet, but that moment was closer than she could imagine. Because while Naomi endured insults in silence, her husband was preparing to shatter that silence completely. A storm was coming to Ivory Hills, and this time, Naomi wouldn't be the one swept away. Naomi drove home slowly, gripping the steering wheel tighter than she meant to. The sun was still bright, but the day felt dark. Her mind replayed every word Victoria had thrown at her, every laugh Chloe made at her expense. Each one cut deeper the more she thought about it. She pulled into her driveway and sat there a moment, staring at her reflection in the rearview mirror. "Maybe I really talk funny," she whispered. "Maybe I sound stupid." It hurt to even say it out loud. She swallowed hard, blinking back tears. When she finally walked inside, the house smelled like the curry chicken Erin made earlier. The warmth of home wrapped around her, but it didn't reach her heart. Erin stepped out of the kitchen with a smile. "Hey, baby, you're home early." Naomi forced a smile, taking off her shoes. Traffic was light. He leaned in to kiss her cheek, but paused when he saw her eyes. "What happened?" "Nothing," she said quickly. Too quickly. Erin stepped closer, lifting her chin so she met his eyes. "You can't lie to me. Talk to me." But she shook her head, stepping away. "I don't want to sound foolish." "You could never sound foolish," he said softly. "Not to me." His voice was gentle, but Naomi's heart felt heavy. She didn't want pity. She didn't want to be the weak one. Instead of answering, she slipped into the bedroom and closed the door behind her. Erin didn't push. He just whispered through the door, "I'm here when you're ready." Naomi sat on the edge of the bed, staring at her hands. They were strong hands that worked long hours, cleaned big houses, raised a daughter, supported a home. But today, they felt small. Her mind traveled backwards, drifting into memories she tried to bury. She was 7 again, standing in a Jamaican classroom as 2 kids mocked her after she answered a question. "You talk so weird," they had laughed. Her teacher didn't defend her. Then she was 12, moving to the United States for the first time. A boy in her class said, "Say that again. Your voice sounds like a cartoon." At 16, working her first job, a customer complained she was impossible to understand. The hurt had stacked over the years, like books on a shelf heavy. Leaning, waiting to fall, she whispered into her hands, "Why my voice always make people judge me?" For a long time, she sat there in silence, letting the tears run freely. Later that week, the isolation grew worse. At the grocery store, Naomi approached the deli counter. "Can I get a pound, eh?" The worker interrupted with a blank stare. "What?" Naomi hesitated. "A poundo turkey, please." "You need to slow down," he snapped. "Speak normal." Naomi nodded quietly. She didn't argue, didn't correct him. She just shrank a little more inside herself. At church, a mother asked her to repeat something 3 times, sighing loudly each time. "Never mind," the woman finally said. "I can't understand that accent." Even Layla's teacher told Naomi, "Maybe your daughter struggles in reading because English at home is different." Naomi barely responded, afraid she might cry right there in the hallway. One night, Naomi stood in front of the bathroom mirror while brushing her teeth. She paused, studying her own reflection. She opened her mouth and whispered, "Why people hate the way I speak." Her voice cracked. She wasn't angry. She was tired. Tired of hiding. Tired of pretending the words didn't sting. Later that evening, as she sat on the couch staring at her folded hands, the doorbell rang. Mrs. Patel stood outside holding a small container of food. "I made too much. Thought you and Erin might want some." Naomi smiled weakly. "Thank you." Mrs. Patel paused, her eyes soft. "You look troubled. Everything all right?" Naomi hesitated. This woman had always treated her kindly. She deserved honesty. "Some days I feel like my voice don't belong anywhere." Mrs. Patel sighed, stepping inside. "People mocked my accent too when I first came here. They thought I sounded strange. But this voice fed my children. This voice built my home. This voice survived." Her words sank deep into Naomi's heart. Mrs. Patel touched her arm gently. "Your voice is your story. Don't let anyone make you ashamed of it." Naomi felt a tear slip down her cheek, but this time not from pain, from relief, from feeling understood. That night she found Aaron working at his desk, papers and books scattered everywhere. She walked up behind him and placed her hands on his shoulders. "Thank you for not giving up on me," she whispered. He turned and took her hands. "I'll never give up on you. Your voice is the reason I fell in love." Naomi smiled, faint but real. But even with that love surrounding her, doubt still lived inside. Doubt from years of being told she wasn't enough. Doubt from today's insults. Doubt from decades of being treated as less. Still, there was a spark. She didn't know it yet, but every humiliation was building toward something bigger. Something powerful. Something that would flip the entire story upside down. Because the same voice they tried to silence was the voice the whole community would soon hear loud, proud, and impossible to ignore. Naomi arrived at the Hawthorne house early the next morning, though her stomach churned the whole drive. The charity gala was only a few days away, and Victoria was in one of her perfection or nothing moods, except perfection never seemed to apply to anyone except herself. Before Naomi even stepped inside, Victoria opened the door with a sigh. "You're late." Naomi checked her watch. "It's 8:55. "I said 8:30, Victoria barked. "If you want to keep this job, you need to be better." Naomi lowered her gaze, swallowing the heaviness in her throat. "Yes, ma'am." The minute Naomi started dusting, she heard Chloe's voice carry from upstairs. "Mom, can you believe how she talks? It's like English with a twist. A bad twist." Victoria laughed loudly. "She should be grateful we even let her work here." Naomi froze, her cloth still in her hand. She forced herself to keep moving. She worked in silence because speaking only ever made things worse. By midday, her back ached from polishing silverware and scrubbing floors, but she kept her head down. She was reaching for a vase when she heard a soft voice behind her. "You talk like home," said a young housekeeper Naomi had never met before. "I'm from Trinidad. I hear your accent, and it feels like warmth." Naomi blinked in surprise. "People don't usually say that." The woman smiled kindly. "That's because they don't understand. But I do." It was a small moment, but it felt like a spark in a room that had been dark for too long. As the gala approached, tensions in the Hawthorne house grew. Victoria hovered behind Naomi the whole day, snapping orders every few minutes. "Don't drag your words like that when guests arrive. Speak clearly if someone asks you something. Actually, don't speak at all. Just smile. We can't have accents confusing people tonight." That last line cut the deepest. Naomi's hand trembled as she set down a tray. Victoria noticed. "Oh, for heaven's sake, don't get emotional. It's not that serious." Naomi quietly whispered, "It's serious to me." Victoria rolled her eyes. "Of course it is." When Naomi went home that evening, she felt exhausted not from the cleaning, but from the constant weight of humiliation. Aaron greeted her with a bright smile and a tight hug, but she pulled away with a weak laugh. "Careful. Don't want to crush your fancy papers." He studied her face. "You sure you're okay?" She nodded too quickly. "Yeah, just tired." Aaron wasn't convinced, but he didn't push. He simply kissed her forehead and whispered, "You're stronger than you know, Naomi." She didn't feel strong. Not yet. The next day, Aaron approached her while she organized laundry. "I want you to come with me to the gala," he said gently. Naomi's heart jumped. No, I can't go there dressed like a guest. And everyone will hear me talk." "Good," Aaron interrupted softly. "They should hear you." Naomi swallowed hard, eyes dropping to the folded clothes. "My voice. It embarrasses me." He lifted her chin slowly. "Your voice is beautiful. It's the sound of someone who survived, who came here with nothing and made a life. Not everyone with a fancy accent can say that." But Naomi shook her head. "They'll laugh. They always laugh." Aaron pressed a kiss into her hair. "One day they won't." She didn't know what he meant, but a strange feeling stirred inside her, fear mixed with hope. On the morning of the gala, Naomi arrived at the Hawthorne house before sunrise. The place buzzed with event planners, decorators, chefs, and florist Dot. As Naomi set up tables, she overheard Victoria boasting to a group of women. "Our keynote speaker tonight is a world-renowned linguist. Finally someone who knows how real English should sound." They laughed. Naomi felt her stomach twist. She picked up the plates with shaking hands. Later, she overheard Chloe muttering, "I hope that Maid isn't near the mic tonight. People like her shouldn't talk in public." Naomi felt the words slice into her chest. But instead of falling apart, something inside her hardened like steel, forming under heat. She whispered to herself, "They don't know me." Her hands stopped shaking. As the hours passed, Naomi noticed something different in the way she moved. She wasn't shrinking as much. She wasn't walking as quietly. She started standing straighter, even while placing centerpieces or refilling glasses of water. Each time Victoria snapped at her, Naomi breathed through it. Each time Chloe rolled her eyes, Naomi stayed steady. And right before leaving, she received a text from Aaron. "Tonight is important. Be ready." She didn't know what he had planned. She didn't know how the night would unfold. But for the first time in a long while, Naomi felt something powerful rising in her chest. The beginning of a change. A change fueled by every insult she ever heard. A change built from every time she was laughed at. A change that was about to explode in front of the entire community. And Naomi had no idea just how big it would be. The Hawthorne house had never looked so grand. Crystal lights glowed from every corner, violins played softly, and well-dressed guests filled the rooms with polite chatter. Naomi moved silently among them, placing drinks, adjusting trays, and making sure everything stayed perfect. Tonight, she tried to keep her head down, but her heart wouldn't stop pounding. Victoria walked past her, whispering under her breath, "Don't speak unless you absolutely must." Naomi bit her lip and nodded. She wanted to disappear. In the center of the room, a small stage was set up with a microphone. Naomi stared at it as she passed by, feeling a knot at the bottom of her stomach. She didn't belong here, not as a guest, not as a speaker, not even as a shadow. At least, that's what she had always believed. Aaron still hadn't arrived, and she felt oddly nervous about that too. Guests began settling into their seats as Victoria took the stage. She tapped the mic twice and smiled proudly. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Hawthorne Charity Gala. Tonight we have a very special treat. Our keynote speaker is a globally respected linguist whose work is studied in universities worldwide." She paused. Dramatically, Naomi wiped her hands on her apron and kept her eyes down. Victoria continued, "Please give a warm welcome to Dr. Aaron Clark." Naomi froze. A glass slipped from her hand and shattered on the floor. Her breath caught in her throat. Her husband. Here, the famous linguist. Was him? She dropped to her knees, sweeping the shards quickly as whispers spread through the hall. Did she just break a glass? Who's Aaron Clark? Isn't that the maid's last name? Naomi's heart hammered. She couldn't look up. She couldn't breathe. Meanwhile, Aaron walked onto the stage in a charcoal suit, calm and dignified. His warm eyes scanned the crowd until he found her. He gave her a small nod. She felt her chest tighten. Chloe leaned toward her mother, whispering, "Wait, that's her husband?" "No way." Victoria swallowed hard, trying to force a smile as she clapped stiffly. Aaron adjusted the mic and began speaking with steady grace. "Good evening. Language is more than grammar, more than rules, more than accents. Language is identity, story, home. His voice filled the room with confidence and warmth. Many people believe some accents are wrong or less intelligent, but accents are simply maps of where we've been, who we are, and the courage it took to arrive here. Naomi froze where she stood, broom still in hand. Aaron continued, "Tonight, I want to talk about how prejudice hides behind so-called corrections, how people are mocked not for speaking incorrectly, but for speaking differently." The room became uncomfortably quiet. Victoria shifted in her seat. Aaron's tone softened. "And I want to begin by honoring someone very important to me." The knot in Naomi's chest tightened so much she could barely swallow. "My wife, Naomi Clark." Every head turned to her. Her cheeks burned. Her hands trembled. She looked down at the broom as if it could shield her. Aaron extended a hand toward her from the stage. "Naomi, sweetheart, come here." She shook her head desperately. I can't, please, Aaron." But he smiled gently. "Yes, you can." A soft murmur spread through the crowd as Naomi slowly stepped forward. She could hear Chloe whisper behind her, "This is going to be hilarious." Her back stiffened, but she kept moving. When she reached him, Aaron touched her hand tenderly. "Your voice," he said through the microphone, "is the most beautiful English I've ever heard." Naomi's breath broke. She covered her mouth, tears rising. Aaron continued, his voice sharper now. "Because her voice carries strength, culture, history, and every sacrifice she ever made." Victoria's smile was fading by the second, and for anyone who believes her accent is something to mock. Aaron pulled a small device from his pocket. "I want to share something." He pressed a button. A recording played loudly through the speakers. Victoria's voice echoed across the room. "Speak properly so I understand you." Chloe's voice followed. "People like her shouldn't talk in public." Gasps filled the hall. Naomi's knees went weak. Her hands shook so badly she pressed them to her chest. Aaron's voice came back in. "Mockery is not correction. Racism is not confusion. And cruelty is not a misunderstanding." Guests turned toward the Hawthorns, faces full of disgust and disappointment. Victoria stood up abruptly. That recording is out of context." But people weren't listening. Aaron continued calmly. "My wife came to this country with courage, with pride, with a voice shaped by her homeland. And instead of being welcomed, she was humiliated inside this very home." Naomi looked around the room, tears streaming down her face. For the first time ever, people were looking at her with respect, not annoyance, not pity, not mockery. Respect. Aaron turned to her and said softly, "Naomi, you have never needed to change your voice. The world needs to change the way it listens." The crowd erupted into applause. Mrs. Patel wiped her eyes. Guests stood up, clapping loudly. Even those who once ignored Naomi now looked at her with admiration. Victoria's face drained of all color. Chloe shrank in her chair. Naomi pressed a hand to her heart, overwhelmed. Her voice, her accent, her story. had been turned into something powerful. Aaron took her hand again. "Stand here with me," he whispered. And she did. For the first time in her life, she stood in front of a wealthy room full of people, not as a maid, not as someone to be mocked, but as a woman whose voice finally mattered. When the applause faded, the room felt different, like a truth had finally broken through the walls of Ivory Hills. Victoria stood frozen, her confidence drained. Whispers circled around her, each one sharper than the last. Chloe shrank behind her phone, deleting the video she once posted proudly. Naomi wiped her tears and stepped away from the stage. Aaron gently held her hand. "You okay?" he asked softly. She nodded. For the first time in a long time. Yes, guests approached her, people who had never spoken to her before. "I'm sorry for what you went through. You didn't deserve any of that. You were incredibly brave." Tonight, Naomi didn't feel like a maid anymore. She felt seen. Near the exit, Victoria hesitated before approaching, her voice thin and trembling. "Naomi, I owe you an apology." Naomi met her eyes. "You hurt me. For years. But I'm choosing to forgive you, not for you, but for myself." Victoria nodded, speechless. Naomi walked past her, stepping outside into the cool night air with her head held higher than ever. In the following weeks, things changed quietly but clearly. Victoria resigned from the charity board. Chloe kept to herself. And the same neighbors who once treated Naomi like invisible now greeted her with respect. Mrs. Patel hugged her one afternoon and whispered, "Your voice changed more than a room, it changed people." Inspired, Naomi began recording short English lessons for immigrants and new speakers. Her goal wasn't to fix accents, but to help people feel confident in their own voices. In her first recording, she said, "Your accent is part of your story. Don't let anyone shame you for where you come from." People shared her lessons quickly. Friends, neighbors, then strangers from other towns began listening. One evening, Naomi stood in front of the mirror. She took a deep breath and spoke her truth out loud. "My voice matters." Aaron wrapped his arms around her, smiling. "It always did. Now everybody knows." Naomi smiled back, her voice steady and proud. "They mocked my English," she whispered, "but they were the ones who needed to learn." And with that, she stepped forward, no longer silent, no longer small, finally free to speak in the voice she had spent her whole life being told to hide.